Jinho was an ordinary salaryman, living in the bustling city of Seoul. His life was a monotonous cycle of work and sleep, with little excitement to break the routine. He was a software engineer by trade, but his dreams were anything but logical. They were vivid, chaotic, and increasingly nightmarish. It was on one such night, after another long day at the office, that Jinho's world began to unravel. He went to bed, hoping for a few hours of peace, but what he found in his dreams was a terror beyond his wildest fears. Jinho found himself back in his old elementary school classroom, a place he hadn't thought about in years. He was a child again, sitting at a wooden desk, surrounded by classmates who were frantically scribbling answers on their test papers. The room was eerily silent, the only sound being the scratching of pencils on paper. He felt an odd sense of detachment, as if he were watching the scene from outside his own body. It was then that he remembered the strange advice from a dream he had weeks ago: stretch your fingers backward. If they bend without pain, you are in a dream. Curious and somewhat amused, Jinho stretched his fingers backward. They bent effortlessly without the slightest hint of pain. He chuckled to himself, realizing that he was indeed dreaming. With this newfound awareness, he decided to have a little fun. He began goofing around, making funny faces and noises, confident that none of it mattered since it was all just a dream. But as he continued to play, he noticed his classmates had stopped writing. They were all staring at him. Their faces began to twist and contort, morphing into grotesque, nightmarish visages. Eyes bulged, mouths stretched into impossible shapes, and skin sagged and peeled away, revealing raw, bloody flesh beneath. Jinho's heart pounded in his chest. The playful atmosphere had turned sinister in an instant. He tried to wake up, but no matter how hard he pinched himself or shouted, he remained trapped in the nightmare. The monstrous children began to chant his name, their voices blending into a horrifying cacophony. Jinho awoke with a scream, drenched in sweat. He bolted upright in his bed, his heart racing. The memory of those twisted faces lingered, etched into his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to him, even as he got ready for work. At the office, he tried to focus on his tasks, but the nightmare haunted him. During a coffee break, he decided to confide in his colleague, Min-soo, hoping that talking about it might alleviate some of the fear. "Min-soo, I had the most terrifying dream last night," Jinho began, his voice trembling. "I was back in school, taking a test. I realized I was dreaming because I stretched my fingers, and they bent backward without pain. But then my classmates' faces, they turned into these horrible, grotesque monsters." Min-soo chuckled dismissively. "Sounds like you've been watching too many horror movies, Jinho. It's just a dream. Don't let it get to you." Jinho forced a smile, trying to brush it off as well. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The rest of the day passed in a blur, his mind preoccupied with the nightmare. That night, Jinho lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't sleep, the memory of the nightmare replaying in his mind. In a moment of desperation, he decided to test the method again. He stretched his fingers backward, half expecting them to bend. To his horror, they did, painlessly. His mind reeled. He remembered talking to Min-soo earlier, but the details felt hazy, like a distant memory. Panic set in as he realized he might still be dreaming. He tried to recall his entire day, but it felt fragmented, disjointed. He hadn't actually left his apartment. He had never gone to the office. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He was still trapped in the nightmare. Jinho's nights became a battleground. Each time he closed his eyes, he was plunged into a world of horror. The twisted faces of his classmates haunted him, their grotesque features more vivid and terrifying with each encounter. The line between dream and reality blurred further, and he found it increasingly difficult to discern one from the other. He tried staying awake, but the exhaustion soon overwhelmed him. When he did sleep, he was tormented by the same nightmare, the same eerie classroom, and the same monstrous faces. He became a shell of his former self, his once vibrant eyes now dull and haunted. His colleagues noticed the change in him. Minsu approached him one day, concern etched on his face. "Jinho, you don't look well. Maybe you should see a doctor." But Jinho couldn't bring himself to tell Minsu the truth. He nodded numbly, knowing that no doctor could help him escape the nightmare that had become his life. Desperation drove Jinho to seek out a solution. He delved into research on lucid dreaming, hoping to find a way to control his dreams. He read about techniques to confront and conquer nightmares, clinging to the hope that he could reclaim his life. One night, armed with the knowledge he had gathered, Jinho entered the nightmare willingly. He found himself back in the classroom, the air thick with tension. The children stared at him with their grotesque faces, but this time he was prepared. He confronted them, demanding to know why they tormented him. The room fell silent, and the children's faces twisted further, their voices merging into a single, chilling whisper. "You have been chosen, Jinho. The power to traverse dreams is both a gift and a curse. You must learn to control it or be consumed by it." Jinho felt a surge of determination. He had to break free from this curse. He focused on the techniques he had learned, forcing himself to take control of the dream. The classroom began to dissolve, the grotesque faces fading into darkness. But something went wrong. The darkness didn't lift. He was trapped in an endless void, the oppressive silence pressing down on him. He tried to wake up, to escape, but he was locked in the blackness alone. A cold, creeping fear settled into his bones. This was no longer just a dream. This was his reality now. He was never going to wake up. Days turned into weeks, and Jinho's absence was noticed at work. His colleagues assumed he had taken a leave of absence or perhaps moved on to another job. Minsu tried calling and even visited Jinho's apartment, but there was no answer. It was as if Jinho had vanished from the face of the earth. In the eternal void of his nightmare, Jinho wandered aimlessly, his mind slowly unraveling. The twisted faces of his classmates haunted him, their grotesque visages a constant reminder of his torment. He realized with growing horror that he was trapped in a cycle, a never-ending loop of fear and despair. The keeper of dreams appeared before him, his face a mask of cold indifference. "You have failed, Jinho. The power you sought to control has consumed you. This is your eternity," Jinho screamed. But no sound escaped his lips. The darkness swallowed him, his mind fracturing into a million pieces. He was a prisoner of his own nightmares, forever lost in the abyss. Back in the waking world, Jinho's apartment remained untouched. a silent testament to his existence. Dust gathered on his belongings, and the world moved on without him. His colleagues eventually forgot about him, his name becoming a distant memory. Jinho had become a ghost, a shadow trapped between dreams and reality, his fate sealed by the curse he could never escape. Thank you for tuning in. Please leave a like and subscribe. I will see you again next week.